The gods are departing. It's a fascinating description of the siege of Jerusalem recorded by the Roman historian Tacitus in the early 2nd century. It seems to be so removed from the context of the Jewish temple, but a comparison of the contemporary Roman, Jewish, and Christian accounts will show that they're not that far apart from each other. This is not a religious channel, but it's not a religious channel. Contending hosts were seen meeting in the skies. Arms flashed, and suddenly the temple was illumined with fire from the clouds. Of a sudden, the doors of the shrine opened, and a superhuman voice cried, "The gods are departing." At the same moment, the mighty stir of their going was heard. It makes you wonder what the basis was for such a dramatic account. Supernatural embellishment wasn't unusual for Greco-Roman history books, but at the same time it wasn't invented out of thin air. Tacitus leads up to this with the denigrating Hellenized origin of the Jewish people, but this particular element of the story seems drawn from, or similar in source to, a contemporary Jewish historian, Josephus. Josephus used to be, or at least so I've heard, the second most read work after the Bible, but these days it's said that every preacher has a copy of the complete works of Josephus on their shelf that they haven't read. In Wars of the Jews, Book 6. Moreover, at that feast which we call Pentecost, as the priests were going by night into the inner court of the temple, as their custom was, to perform their sacred ministrations, they said that, in the first place, they felt a quaking, and heard a great noise, and after that they heard a sound as of a great multitude, saying, "Let us remove from here." Josephus does record supernatural embellishment alongside actual history, like shining lights, a heifer giving birth to a lamb, and the gates of the temple opening on its own accord. Tacitus seems to have taken some of these details and exaggerated them even further. It's not clear to me if the voice of the multitude was even supposed to be supernatural, but Tacitus seems to reinterpret it as a voice of the gods. This interplay between the Jewish and Roman accounts is intriguing already, but I was also curious if there was a comparable Christian version. One of the things that led me onto the path of deconstruction years ago was getting a wide-margin Bible to do a harmonization of the Gospels. I really think this is an exercise everybody interested in this literature should do, whether they're deconstructing their beliefs or they're a believer, especially if they're a believer. You will not get the benefit of this exercise if you just cheat and buy a prepackaged gospel harmony. I'm really surprised that it's so hard to get Christians just to take a little time and do this simple assignment. But sadly, most people will put time and money into their religion, but not much thought. Doing this helps you see at a glance the parts that the gospel writers have in common with each other, and also how these components are used differently by the various writers. The parts that are unique to each gospel really begin to stand out. You get a feel for how their writing styles differ from each other, something that often gets lost in translation. For instance, you can notice that Matthew freely repeats details, whereas Luke has an idiosyncratic aversion to mention the same thing twice. Matthew recycles details to connect episodes to each other, like the very high mountain at the temptation of Christ and the transfiguration, or the metamorphosis as I prefer. I speculate that if Matthew had been aware of an ascension narrative, he certainly would have used it to connect with the cloud at the transfiguration. Matthew has no problem including a sign in the sky at the second coming and also at the nativity, a star over the city, which sounds suspiciously similar to the one in Josephus. When Luke departs from the other Gospels, it's often to make a reference to Josephus, and that occurs even more frequently in Acts. Luke isn't recording history, it's using known history to situate the narrative. From the vantage point after Josephus, Luke includes more details about the siege of Jerusalem than the other Gospels. The text presents this as a prophecy, but like other predictions in the Bible, it's clearly written ex eventu, or after the fact. This might seem dishonest to modern audiences, but it probably wasn't seen that way at the time. Other examples of predictions were coded that way in the text. The conclusion of the book of Daniel says to seal the prophecy until its fulfillment, to explain why the book was unknown until after it happened. Similarly, Revelation says not to seal it, to let the hearer know that it's describing events that have already happened. The primitive audiences at the time may have had a more sophisticated understanding of this than today's futurists do. But when Luke departs from Matthew and Mark here, there doesn't seem to be an explicit intertextual relationship to Josephus. What we do see, however, is a reliance on the prophet Ezekiel, particularly referring to the time of punishment. A major event and theme of the book of Ezekiel is the glory of God leaving the temple and becoming mobile for his followers in exile. In this sense, perhaps Luke has understood Josephus in the same way as Tacitus. I'll admit, it's not exactly a smoking gun. What do you think? Am I just finding a connection in the text because I want to? Let me know. Either way, I hope this has been informative.